Hi, I'm Shane from Admin Arsenal. So let's go through an existing package that we've got. We imported this from the package library. We want to walk through install steps and properties. So these are all install steps for the Adobe Flash for IE Windows 10. As you know, Flash for IE comes in many different flavors, and Windows 10, depending on which version of Windows 10 you have, it depends on which Flash file you'll use. So we've already got our install files. These are the MSUs. They're currently in our repository. And I just want to walk you through this. So notice we've got step 1. This will only kick off on machines that have Windows 10 release 1607 and that are 32-bit. How do we set that? This is in the conditions. Notice in the OS version, it's not going to run on anything that's not Windows 10. But even further down, only 32-bit versions of Windows 10. PowerShell version condition is not used in this case. And the logged on state, generally speaking, that's set to always run. That means, if you have a condition set on a step, only run this step if a user is logged on, or only run it if a user is not logged on, or just always run regardless of the logged on state. Notice we do have a registry condition here, because this is how we can determine whether this is build 1607 of Windows 10. Click this little arrow. You have to specify the Hive, HKey local machine, and then the path, software, Microsoft Windows NT current version. And then if there is a value name called release ID with the text 1607, so notice how we said if this registry exists, this registry value exists, release ID with the value of 1607, then we know that that is release 1607. And conversely down here, 1511, you'll see the same thing. It's only 1511. The base install of Windows 10 doesn't even have the release ID. So all we're looking for is to say, does this not exist? Any release ID that starts with 1. So that's how we get around being able to know that these are just the base install of Windows 10. Your options on your each step also has its options. Obviously, you can disable that step if you want. Run as, very important. For the most part, you want to keep this as the deploy user, but there are times where you might want to override something and say run this as local system or run as a logged on user. Maybe there's a process that needs to display some information for the logged on user or has to be run in the context of a logged on user. In that case, you would select run this step as logged on user. If you do have to do that, by the way, I would go back to the conditions and say only run if a user is logged on. Yeah, we'll cover the installation requires source a little later. That's not that often. That doesn't happen that often. The error mode, simply, what do you want to do if you hit an error? What constitutes an error? Well, in the install step, an error is when this MSU or exe or whatever you're calling as your install file returns. When it's finished, it's going to return what's known as an error code or an exit code. These integers need to be listed here if anything that's going to be returned that constitutes a success. Usually 0 is a success. We also notice at 1641 and 3010, any new success code has to be delimited by a comma. If this runs, passes all the conditions and runs, returns anything but these 3 return codes, it will be called an error. Well, what do you want to do in that case? Usually you want to stop the deployment, but you do have the option of continuing, I'll just move on to the next step, or you've seen this error, stop on it, but call it a success. So you don't usually hit the error mode that often or modify that. And those are really the conditions for your install steps. I'm Shane, we'll talk to you later.